The worst that could possibly happen if you share this broadcast or one of my videos where I more or less skip the crazy talk, as it were. The worst that could happen is that one of your Trump-supporting friends that you don't talk to anymore starts watching my videos without telling you. And if that were to happen, I don't expect that they'll come around to believing in the advanced esoteric side of things. No, I'm not under any such illusion. I don't think that they'll believe in reincarnation. I think that Wiccanism is okay. I don't even expect them to stop being afraid of black people for no reason. No, that's too much to ask. I understand that. I'm not even asking them to stop being afraid of Muslims for no reason. Now the Jew thing, that's got to go. And well, just because you're afraid of somebody, it's not a quality that you should find spiteful towards them. It's not a quality worth hating in them. It's something you should hate about yourself. So, I'm going to try to continue to share this little video here. Just on a couple more Facebook groups and stuff like that. Because, that's all you got. That's all there is. Facebook, the monopoly. Magically, all 3 other platforms just couldn't fucking keep up. Nothing to do with the fake news that helped it happen. That wasn't a coordinated takeover of American free speech. Nope, nothing to see here, folks. Yeah. I'm just going to share this in some random groups and see if I can get my ass trolled. How about that? Let's do that. Oh, yeah. As I was saying, I don't expect people will come away from this video or any other video of mine and just start believing in things that will make them spiritually more advanced. That's not really the point. Because, well, what's the point of being spiritually advanced to begin with? It's supposed to make you a better person. So, if your relationship with God isn't making you a better person, you might want to ask whether or not you're worshiping a true God or a false God. Whether be you're being led to the truth that will set you free, or whether you're being led astray by ravenous wolves in sheep's clothing. Oh, seeking Christ, prayer warriors. I'm going to go ahead and get myself removed from that group by posting this video in there. Because, you know, I get a feeling they just won't want to hear what they don't like to be told. And that is that the entirety of the Christian church has failed humanity. They've failed God. They've failed themselves. Most importantly, as it pertains to what I'm going to be talking about on this video, they failed America. Now, back when I was a little crusader, kid, we thought of Europe as a place where men could be free. It never occurred to us that Europe was a racist place. Never occurred to us that Europe was a fascist place. Never really occurred to us that, feudalism was kind of fucked up. No. But we did know some things about European Western society that were quite correct. Because fiction and poetry and movies and heroism, these things all lend themselves to that quite well. See, a long time ago, you had a little town called Rome, and they had quite a little thing going for them. It was swell. And there has been, in retrospect, many very skewed views of Roman history. There have been entire forgeries of Roman history included as Roman history. There have been things that were forged that were found out that nobody knows that they were found out. And the misconceptions continue. But first and foremost, the thing that they don't tell you about Roman history, the thing that they don't make clear enough, in my opinion and in most historians' opinions, but I don't have a piece of paper that says I'm a historian, so what do I know? What they don't tell you is why Rome fell. When did it fall? Why did it fall? How did it fall? Who made it fall? Did it start with the Carthaginians? Did it start with the Jews? Did it start with the Turks? Those were all problems for Rome around the time right before it fell. And this is not a video that's going to blame it all on Islam either, because there's something they're not telling you as well. When Rome started to fall, it started to fall because of a place called Thrace. A place called Scythia, an incursion into farmland in what was at that time just simply called Poland. Agreed. I would know. Yes, and Putin isn't. So let's get that, straight. Okay. Now, if you knew anything about God, there's a person in the comments right now. If you knew anything about God, I suppose you went to Sunday school, so you know not to interrupt with off-topic subjects when the teacher is speaking. Okay. Now, Thrace was quite a productive land where Roman officers would settle. They'd be given estates in Thrace and have land and tracts of land and farmland and countryside estates all over what is now Ukraine and Romania. But then, from the north side of the Black Sea, came some raiders. Like unto the raiders of Attila the Hun, they were Scythians. And these Scythians drove a wedge right between Western Europe and Constantinople. And that was the crippling blow that made Rome fall and gave rise to something else. And again, there's been a lot of propaganda about Islam being the sole cause. Oh, they did a lot more than the Crusaders did to them, that's for sure. I agree completely with that. But what instigated them? What caused them to rise up? Was there some sort of a power vacuum? Was there some sort of a war that happened right before that? Was there some sort of a war, perhaps, that joined with them and continued to annihilate Western civilization for 1,000 years? Now, there's two primary forms of conspiracy on the internet. One, anti-Islamic. One, anti-Semitic. And you might be told that this place called Khazaria, now Kazakhstan, Chechnya, and Georgia, was the home of some people that converted to Judaism after the Babylonian captivity. That is the most ignorant version of that story that could possibly be told. There were, in fact, real Jews who went there. And they were driven out by these people that were later referred to as White Russians. Now, you hear the word White Russians, and if you're a Southerner or a Ku Klux Klan member or a skinhead or just a genuine, far-right, fear-mongering moron, you hear White Russians, and you think, oh, good Christian white European type people. Well, you'd be wrong. See, this particular deployment of Russian Spetsnaz retirees who were called back to action, volunteers, etc., rallied under the command of this man named Kadyrov, who was one of Putin's good friends. Putin appointed him to lead an entire region, even after he led a rebellion against Putin, which is a story for another day. And this happened right before the downing of a certain plane over East Ukraine. And Ukraine, before that downing, before the downing of that plane, before eyes from all over the world really started focusing in on Russia because of the downing of that plane, this brigade of 20,000 troops was about to go to Ukraine. But then they didn't. And then Mosul fell. Hello? Do I need to explain that? Perhaps I should show you a map that brings into context the distance between these areas. In fact, we can zoom right in. See that little sliver of water at the bottom? That's the top of the Black Sea right there. Lower left of center. Not far at all from northern Iraq. And in fact, the heart of Chechnya and the other places where these men rallied from is much further south of there and includes Dagestan. See this territory right here? This was known as the Golden Horde. It is the reason why people were being persecuted in Europe at the time of America's founding. This is the same as that in the top left corner. It's a connate. And after the Babylonian captivity, genuine sons of Abraham, genuine Israelis, genuine Jews, not false Jews, not deceivers, settled in those regions, and as the horde rose, and as alliances with those Chechenian and different sects of Kazakhs and other people were formed, the Jews were driven out. Now understand, this wasn't a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. This was 500 years ago. Now what happened after this to form what we know as modern day Russia is all pretty simple. And it's not hard to understand if you simply go a little further than the story that you're told and actually analyze the story that you're told before you understand why Russia supports Islamic extremists, why Russia is just so much like the horde in every single way. It's not that complicated, and it's set in stone. There's no undoing this past. The only way they could ever outlive it is for Russia to be the many conquers, many countries that were conquered by it. And that's not going to fly in the eyes of somebody like Vladimir Putin. But you know what? There's a difference between Russia and America. And before I go into its inception, let me go into that. America's expansion was based on need. Need to defend themselves from tyranny. What you now know as Russia, their expansion was due to want. They were safe in their high places, but they wanted more. It's really just that simple. Now, you can make the argument the other way about America. I understand that. But with me, you'd lose it. But with Russia, one must consider who they were supposedly afraid of. Because it is in fact them who are in charge, and not some oppositional force that saved Europe. No, that would be Ukraine. You see, right around this time period, I believe it was in 1444-ish, the root of the culture that should be salvaged as Russia came from Kievan roots. Okay, and there was a city-state surrounded by some of the most developed, beautiful, industrious land in the world. And I cannot express how crippling to civilization and to Europe that losing this area above Crimea and the Black Sea actually was. Not just to society and the economy, but to history. There were a lot of old ancient families with old ancient knowledge. A lot of them Jews that shared their knowledge with the world. And they lived up there peacefully for quite some time. In fact, they avoided a lot of wars. But their riches could not stave off the horde. The horde says, why should I barter and let you give me a better deal when I can just take? Remind you of anyone? Now, don't confuse me with someone who's being arcane or archaic or is in some way misunderstanding that the term horde is out of use. There is a specific strategy in my adoption of the term horde. You see, these people use religions. They send people that hide behind their religions and corrupt people who try to follow those religions in ways that better themselves, in ways that are beneficial to society. But you shouldn't attack those religions. You can't say Islam this, or the Jews that, or the Christians that. It's all the same thing. It's the horde. We had a word for this back when this little book called the Bible was written. It was a force that corrupted nobles, businesses, tried to infiltrate industry and infrastructure, saboteurs, deceivers. These are the very people that were so good at war. Alexander conquered the world with their blessing. Genghis Khan was their slave. They preceded him. And when they first took his people captive, and they sent waves towards Europe, archaeologists discovered their skulls. And when you get on YouTube, and you were shown these skulls, you were told that they were descendants of aliens and the Anunnaki. And, oh God, a whole lot of bullshit. Yes, it was Attila the Hun, whose legions had the elongated skulls that were found in Europe. It was the first onslaught of the horde. The very one that wound up giving permanent ruin to the Roman Empire. And I'll just go ahead and not put that one up. Where is it? That one. The bottom left image is a map of the Roman Empire during the time of Christ. And I will attempt to zoom in, or find a better image. Yeah, I'll just find a better image instead of trying to manipulate that one. There we go. Now, this is the Roman Empire that you're all familiar with. It is most of the empire that Alexander conquered, along with most of the former empire of Magdalenia, which you've probably never heard of. And there's a reason for that. But you see, as history progressed, Rome started to become Christian. And this was due to people who were martyring themselves. And we get told a very novel story about what they were martyring themselves regarding. But what has been lost about that history is the same that has been lost in Scripture. And that is, they were giving warnings based upon their understanding of the warnings that Christ was giving. He was giving warnings of those who say they are Jews and are not. You see, the expulsion of Jewish tribes from the land of Gog went on for a very long time. The land of Gog being the land of the Golden Horde. And even at the time of Christ, when Pompey needed to make his stand against Caesar, and even after Pompey's death, his generals and his followers after him were trying to make it to Caesarea. In fact, the last battle of that rebellion against Caesar was fought in Armenia. Why? Reinforcements for the usurpers. There's a deeper history that I could go into now, and that I have gone in on previous videos. And you're free to check those out. But I'm trying to keep it on the level on this video. I want to talk about the values that came from this time. When societal chieftains and influential nobles began to see that these Christians were right, and that these advisors, these so-called scholars, these mystics that were coming from the East, that's on record, were wrong and deceiving them, that is what shook Roman society to its core. That is what changed the world and actually gave us Western civilization. That's when the West really became civilized. All because of a one warning that can apply itself to situation after situation that we have faced. People coming pretending to be us, pretending to be this, pretending to be that, pretending to be our friends in some way. Always having something for us, even. And they're not who they say they are. And they're here simply to deceive us. And the first person that really warned about this, Christians should know. Because he warned that they lusted after children. He warned that they mocked the weak. He warned that they were callous and judgmental. And he warned that those who listened to them were hypocrites and would become hypocrites. Nice guy, very handsome. Anyways. Speaking of nice and handsome guys, how's it going, Mr. Conway? How's it going, Mr. Combs? Neville and Sean have joined us. And I think we have a new viewer here. And, welcome. I appreciate your enthusiasm. But I am nobody's shill, so I don't have a script to read. Everything I say is completely off the cuff. I get a topic in my head, I say a little prayer, and I say, "Baby Jesus, please speak to me." And, it'll happen or it won't. I don't know, man. You really going to try to get into who's nicer between an Australian and an Irish person? I mean, if there was a Canadian in here, never mind. Who's nicer? An Australian or an Irishman? Depends on how much they've had to drink. Anyways. So, by the time you get to, on the right, you're looking at 900 to 1200-ish. Okay. At the bottom, you're looking at 2,000 years ago. By the time you get to, the wrong thing that I just deleted. Shit. Oh. At least it wasn't my camera. That would have sucked even worse. Let me go ahead and get rid of these too while I'm at it. And I'll put that in there so I can sidetrack myself in a second. By the time you get to at least you're modest. I'll show the comments in a second when I can figure out how the fuck to put them up. I have a black window over here. Maybe I can use that. I decided to completely redo the format and just fuck around with it. Anyways. By the time something... I forgot what the fuck that sentence was going to end up in. By the time I got around to saying that sentence, I had forgotten the point of it. By the time 1492 came around, you know, class, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? Yeah. And discovered nothing. Sorry. And discovered that there wasn't a route to where he thought there was. That's what he discovered, really. Came here, found some people. Those people fucking discovered it, didn't they? Anyways. Sorry. And before that, there was a guy named Leif Erikson. Yeah, he discovered it too. 700 years earlier? 700 years. Yeah, 700 fucking years earlier. But, you know, even then, there was this thing called the Horde. And people who were commodores of large trading companies and basically were governors of entire regions of the sea, they had enough intelligence. They alone, at the time, had enough intelligence to take precautions, as it were. And in Europe, causing inquisitions and reformations and all kinds of things you've heard about but never were given context to. Because this part of the map was just grayed out, or just brown, not even labeled. Like nobody fucking lived there. Like it was still covered in ice or some shit. Oh yeah, the Ice Age hadn't ended there, so we just don't teach about history there. There's nobody, really? You think there's nobody up there? There were Scythians. Basically a form of mighty man. And in their houses you find little mighty mouses. Sorry, never mind, sorry. I started to hear the theme, and then I started thinking of Andy Kaufman, and oh, y'all can imagine how much I love Andy Kaufman. Anyways. Here I come to save the day. What was I saying? Oh, I just got completely distracted. It's been too long since I saw that movie. Anyways. The Kipchak. How the fuck... Does anybody know how to pronounce that word? I don't think I have enough phlegm in my entire body. Shit. Hairball. Okay. Did I get it right? You weren't even taught about the Cold War in school? Holy shit. Wow. I hope you've watched like some documentaries or something that caught you up a little. I was living the Cold War in school. Fucking GT honors nerds were into that shit. I went to a little school that was full of GT honors nerds. I didn't hear... I was too young to have been in a grade where they taught about it when I was in New Zealand, but... Not one word, says the man in Australia. Not one word was taught in his schools about the Cold War. Whew. Now, let me just say this. What I'm teaching right now solves the disconnect between church Sunday school and weekday regular school. If you would have known this, no problem. If Sunday school teachers would have known this, no problem. You would have known this. If school teachers, professors, would have known this and connected it, first of all, a lot of them would still be going to church. Imagine that. Imagine how hard it would have been for this church and that church to lose their way and fall for fucking televangelist practices if those professors could make sense and connect the dots between the story of Jonah and the whale and Nineveh and the warnings of the corruption of society and the land of the north. There's a noise coming from my fish tank. Okay. Neville says he has researched heaps since my channel. I'm going to have to keep that in mind for future broadcasts. Just the very idea that, does not compute. Seriously, the idea that you haven't been taught about the Cold War in school and that this is a new concept to you is hard for me to even wrap my fucking head around. I mean, it's as big a deal as us being taught about how bad the Crusades were without being taught about this, because it's virtually an identical swath of land conquered by identical means. And then in the time of Tiberlane, which is, by the way, here, united. And that is Khanates converted to Islam and Islamic kingdoms submitted to Horde rule. And there is really no deciphering whether or not any of the stories on how that happened are really the way it happened. Because how much of that... it's just how much of what they tell you can you fucking believe? How great is their capacity for manipulation? You're looking at the land of many waters, deceivers of the world. They complain about ports? What, because they don't have one on every ocean? Well, they do. Just not open during every season. That's why they're called the north parts. And the north parts has been a thing. Oh, it's been a thing, one of them things. Like the Kardashians, only not just a fad. It's like if the Kardashians became vampires and they lived forever, like a thing. Wait. I think the Kardashians might be vampires. Aren't they from one of those Anias? Never mind. I would normally say that kind of joke just to get my wife, who's from Serbia, to glare at me when I pretend to be an ignorant American. I got this fucking folder over here that I just can't seem to find visually. Okay, just go click on a folder, hit the M key. Okay, it's down there where I thought it was. I need more maps. Okay, so let's go like way the fuck, okay? Let's go, say, for instance, before the Scythians teamed up with Alexander to conquer the world. Why, for instance, would the Scythians, want his attention to go in the direction that it did? First, let's look at Alexander's conquest, okay? I mean, I like taking a full, confluent history perspective, because anybody who reads the Bible is going to need that type of perspective to really make modern times click and to realize the grave mistake that it is to support Donald Trump. And well, if the fucking Bible agrees, it's not a lie. And well, when it comes to Donald Trump, most of the Bible disagrees. But when it comes to the whole collusion thing, when it comes to whether or not he's working for our enemies directly, it's need to know information, man. So let's just get a little history on what it means to be a Westerner. Okay? Now, during this time period, Alexander conquered everything in the known world, supposedly. But there were great kingdoms in Europe, there were great kingdoms in Africa, and they got along just fine. And you know what? They got along just fine with the kingdoms in the Austral Indies and Japan as well. And before the time of Alexander, there was this thing that connected all these places called the Silk Road. And in the time of Alexander, that road was used to strategize against his enemies. It made them predictable in many ways. His conquests were all along it for that reason, and he would outmaneuver enemies in the field and inflict great casualties with very few people. And before his time, the Greeks were themselves surrounded. And one might even wonder where the Greeks came from. And the first thing that a lot of people think is Jews. And my answer would be no. Well, there's a lot to be told in the lines on the map. During wars and relative wars. And if there was a place that was connected back then to where those Greeks had actually came from, as if they had occupied the land of some ancient civilization as opposed to building it, just came and took over, you know? from people like the Athenians, for instance. Say, and I'm hinting to this because it's actually recorded in history, a particular noble allowed a bunch of people that he was doing business with to buy up land. And then those people helped him conquer the pesky people to the south of him. And the part that history says, the part that history fails to say, depending on which version of history you read, because there are some that contend this, those people in Athens and south of there were ruled by women. And there you had a cultural disparity. You see, these people didn't like to be ruled by women either. They thought that women should basically be servants. And you know who else thought women should be able to rule and have equal rights with men? The Magdalenians, the Celtic Empire. Now, when Rome had an internal rebellion, like I said, Pompey went to the east. Who did Caesar go to? Who killed Pompey? Cleopatra, Queen of the Nile. You see, most of what you've heard about Caesar, just like a lot of people who've ruled throughout history, is bullshit. And it's meant to cover up the feminine power that used to exist back when men had honor. And what I mean by this is the honor that has been lost, that is exemplified by the Trumpists. You see, what it used to be, what it used to mean to be a Christian isn't just to tolerate the weak. It's to protect them. What it used to mean to be a Christian isn't just to allow the feeble and the sick to live. It's to make sure that they are cared for. What it used to mean to be a Christian is that you tried to understand truth and opened your mind and made sure that you understood God's Word before you listened to a man. A man cannot speak for God. But what it used to mean to be a Christian is that your heart could. Even Cleopatra's brother conspired with the Greeks against her. And then you have a time period in which this empire is no more. And you have Rome. What was Rome? What gave people that Rome tried to conquer the precursorial knowledge to appreciate Roman rule? Was it just the need to feel safe? Was it just power? Was it opportunity? Was it economics? Or was there a persisting code of honor, subject of much debate, causing civil wars like the one that Caesar himself quelled? Should women be allowed to own land? Should women be allowed to own businesses? These were questions of that time. And who was Caesar? He was a man of the Julii. And boy, did they have some rich women. Some terrible bitches, too. Warlords, even. But modern people wouldn't know anything about that. Because they have a book that starts with male and female created he them, but somehow ends with two prophets that aren't identified being interpreted as two men. Perhaps something's throwing the context off. But I would think to reach a level of spiritual maturity to call themselves the two prophets, you're probably looking at a married couple. Just saying. Very, very attractive, wonderful married couple. Anyways, so Alexander. Didn't go past them mountains to the north. But if you look, this map actually has some labels. Now don't try to rationalize the Scythians by insulting them. They chose their weaponry. Based on their expertise. And if you don't understand how the Khazarian kings wielded power, think of how the Russians summoned the Cossacks, because the Cossacks are the Scythians. And when it comes to the rather large ones who are incredibly good shots, I think my case is made. Now, this may seem like a wild tangent, but it's a very key part of this lesson. In Rome at the time, not this time, we are, I don't even know what time that is, but the map looks right. Oh, wow. Good one. So let me not get distracted by the pretty map. In Rome, at the time of Caesar, at the time of Christ, 2,000 years ago, the leadership that came from Thrace as a result of ranked warriors, not nobility assigned a military task, mind you. Okay, this is the place where ranked warriors who earned their way up through prowess would settle. Okay, basically a naturally selected new settlement of mighty men of the old days was in this land called Thrace. And there was a very hippie-like, almost, like a communist sort of, I suppose you'd call it populist movement, but like in tactics, in its subtlety, more like communism, that came to oppose these people from having influence in Rome and in the hierarchical governance, because supposedly they were the ones to be afraid just because there were a couple of crazy fucks, basically. Not willing to admit that those crazy fucks had ties to nobility. And in the time of Caesar, they had their perfect point of vice, because he was adopted by nobility, but was also adopted by the people of Gaul, and basically fought on behalf of Rome politically during a Gaulish civil war, and that's what you hear about Caesar quelling the rebellion in Gaul. But it's a much more nuanced story than that. But they made the case against Caesar that because he was a warrior, he could not lead. And then they forced him through obstruction, binding his hands when the empire was in peril, forced him to seize more power. And this is a lesson learned in some circles, but that doesn't seem to be just even thought of by others. So, a similar thing starts happening many years later. And I'm going to go ahead and skip past the ones who are explained by their namesake, the vulgars. It wasn't their language that was vulgar. That just, that just means you were a sailor. Well, it was during this time that once again, mighty men in Europe this time became the target. Now see, when the Chistians came and invaded Thrace, the nobles didn't reinforce them in time because of their little power struggle. Seems my connection is gone already, so I'm just going to give it a couple seconds and see if it gets green again. Okay. Now, I think my wife might have been calling me, so I need to find my phone. Where the fuck is it? Okay, so when the northern tribes, as it's said in the history books, or the horde, as it should be said, or the Chistians, as it's said in more informed history books, sliced Rome right down the middle, Rome did not come to reinforce Thrace. Excuse me. My phone keeps vibrating at me, and I don't know why. Oh my God. What the fuck is your problem? Okay, phone was just spazzing out. I have no idea why. So, give me 1 second. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna make the screen black so future people can just fast forward it for a second. Let me get some more coffee right quick. And then we're gonna get back, and do it again. Oh my God, there's no more coffee! feed Tatsuki right quick because she looks hungry as fuck.
Hey, Tatsuki. Alright, everybody gets a little food, everybody gets a little food. Alright.
Alright. So, where was I? Apparently I'm floating in darkness. And now a world has been created. Oh, look how cute. So, all they said about Stalin and apparently the madrasa in fucking Australia that Neville went to is that he is a failed dictator. All they said about Stalin was that he is a failed dictator. I just want the Fox News viewers, if any, who have managed to find this video and have given it a chance so far, to just pause with me and think about that. Now, Neville, mate, that really might be, I hate to say it, one of those deals where, say, China promises to build a big port, or Russia promises to build a big shipyard or something like that, provide a whole bunch of Australian jobs if they just stop bad-mouthing one of their revered figures in history. Could have been either or. I don't even know if there's a Russian shipbuilding facility or a maintenance facility in Australia, but it would make sense for them there to be, considering how many icebreakers they run in the Southern Sea there. But as far as the Chinese port goes, that might ring a bell. Oh, fuck. You know, I think if the baby Jesus were here, he'd be face-palming a lot. But anyway, just gonna hide behind my little map some more. He was just a failed dictator. Stalin, a failed dictator. Hardly. The only thing he failed at was convincing people he was a god. But he tried. Oh man, did he try. You don't really know about Stalin until you see the Stalin the God movies. Yeah, I said movies. Who made them? Stalin did. Stalin. Starring Stalin. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Special shit right there. Something you could easily picture Donald Trump doing. Oh my God. This is really happening in the really real world. Okay. But I'm the one who's crazy. Yeah. Okay. I'm breathing. Deep breaths. Deep fucking breaths. Deep breaths and big giant shits. Okay. See, China even this map is incorrect. Well, even the maps from this period that we see this day are incorrect. There was a royal dynasty recognized by Magdalenia, recognized by India before its cataclysm, and it ruled Manchuria, Japan, China, Southeast Asia, and were cousin to the Pagoda family, which ruled all of the Indonesian islands. And they were cousins to the Australasians, and they were cousins to the Egyptians, who cohabitated, both of them, with many different tribes from many different places all over the world. It was an empire of friendship. I had it muted for just a second. Yeah, I took a little moment to think about things while I did some shit around here that was going to be noisy, and I didn't want to bug y'all. But anyways, during the early 1900s, this thing called communism was spreading, right? Now, this isn't the first time an ideology had spread. See, just like that ideology that made the nobility think of themselves like they confused themselves with elected leaders, for fuck's sake. I mean, for nobility to be populist was just beyond the pale. It was ironic, and it was just inconceivable, and you didn't think it was going to work, and then it worked, kind of like Trumpism. In fact, isn't that nobility practicing populism? Yeah, see, the thing about nobility is that they're greedy, which makes them easy to control. But because they did not rally behind their greatest generals, their greatest fighters, their greatest retirees and vacationers, who were all, of course, family or at least friends of the men of Thrace, now Ukraine. They didn't come to their aid. And what happened was disastrous. They began to lose major cities all over Eastern Europe. They lost Constantinople. Even though the Romans sent an army out, led by a noble, they were slaughtered. They had no idea what awaited them. Happened in what is now, I believe, southwest Serbia. And then from there, all the different allied Germanic tribes that had basically allied themselves at the time either with the Cossacks or with Rome. Yeah, let's look back at that time. They just all came and fucking raided everything and began exterminating what was left of Celtic civilization. Nature shrines, goddess temples, that sort of thing. That wasn't the end of Rome. It wasn't the end of the idea. They didn't exterminate the people. They thought they could steal their knowledge, steal their history, and eventually they would exterminate themselves. Don't let the colors confuse you. So here we have a look at Rome 1,000 years ago. Before the fall of the mighty men who protected it. Because as long as there were those families, like my family, as long as those families were there, as long as they taught their children properly, and as long as they took in refugees who could give them both strength and intelligence so that they could continue to learn from the world, maintaining a resilient gene pool, maintaining resilience to disease, maintaining resilience to deception. They understood that alliances were born out of love, not hate. And all those ideas were slowly corrupted. Just a few centuries after they were allowed to blossom. I think somebody's home. 1 second, please. Alright. So during this time period, Europe actually looked a lot like this again. Been on hanging out?
I don't know. Maybe they're like that and shit and stuff like that.
Oh, cool. Oh, yeah, that's right. So I was just getting to the original point of my video here.
Oh, cool.
So don't screw me up. And what's interesting, and I'm sorry for the sudden slower pace than usual slowness. You know, I don't exactly talk like a Yankee to begin with.
Just because we talk slow don't mean we stupid.
I like to actually contemplate and have original thoughts as opposed to stringing together shit I read in books. I mean, that can pass for intelligence, but, you know, I stopped trying to wing it when I was like 12. Anyway. In Europe, at this very time, 1200 to 1500. There were a couple of other things going on. Persecutions. Persecutions not unlike that which gave Alexander power, so that the map on the left could be erased from history while nobody was even looking. Not unlike persecutions that you've read about. That led certain types of Christians and Jews to leave Europe. Oh, the kitten. You timed your laugh at the kitten right after I said Jews.
Sorry. She rolled over, showed me her belly, and meowed at me. What was I supposed to do?
Oh, that was priceless. Well, one of the groups that was being persecuted this time, you've been told that they were spitting on the cross and worshiping Baphomet. But actually, they were the last remnants of that civilization that truly revered and respected women. And as well, so were some Reformationists, and as well, so were many Hebrews, now known as Jews. And during this very time period, there became a new political movement, a lot in its manners like the populism of the past, and that influenced leadership and persecuted people that disagreed with it a lot like those movements of the past. And in some forms, it was known as the Inquisition. And more than anything else, the Inquisition was there to erase the last remnants and evidences of the Templars. All the Templars were Hebrews who converted to Christianity. They were related by blood to the Celtic tribes, and they were given refuge and allowed to purchase land among the European tribes, the Germanic tribes. And the reason why is the reason for the namesake of Thrace to begin with. You see, all of Europe was settled from the land of Thrace. It is where the sons of Noah first encamped and then sent out their families into that wilderness. And then those tracts of land were named Thrace because they were given by God to 3 tribes: Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh. And I know all about the earlier history that supposedly accounts for the land that was given to them. But I'm telling you a lot of other stuff that those people didn't tell you that I think is pretty much obvious. So perhaps you should just take my word on that little bit. The 3 major indigenous tribes of Europeans were Hebrews. And the Celts, having direct descendancy of the sons of Noah through even Greece in their books, thank you, Mr. Conway, welcomed them with open arms. What annoys me is that there's some words that, like Celts, for instance, I know it's not the word, but I'm just like forced to use it. Kind of annoying me. Like the kitten. Kitten, you're kind of annoying me. Stop it. Come attack my hand. It's quieter. She does not attack the hand on the couch. She just sits there and like makes this cute ass face with her head sideways. No, like I'm gonna get you at all. She just sits there and wonders what the fuck you're doing. I think this cat is a nerd. I think she has like a nerd brain. I think she's just too fucking curious for her own good. I've never had a cat that was so interested in the fish tanks, that's for sure. What are you doing? What am I doing? I'm talking about a fucking cat. Alright, Neville. I think you get where I was going with this. Europeans failed the very standard that made them great. And then they were surrounded and overtrodden. And it's because of the vast influence on history that led us to believe this was equivalent to this, that we don't even know how this works. And most people don't even know that guys like this exist. Really, Dingo? I don't know if you realize it, but that guy is not an Arab. In fact, he does not, well, he may speak Arabic, but he primarily, on videos, speaks Russian. You know, as if the people around him fucking understand it. And you've been shown a lot of things on the internet about Washington, D.C. and the Bilderbergers and Area 51, and you've been made to think that Obama was a Muslim. And just all kinds of very interesting things. But they never told you about Gaddafi in Libya, one of the primary suppliers of terrorists before we killed him. They never told you how he was doing a deal with Putin and Medvedev and letting the Russians build a base in Benghazi. Yeah, there was a Russian base getting built in Benghazi. And none of those people ever told you about that on Fox News, did they? They never told you that Putin's best friend Kadyrov there, whose friends are a bunch of mercenaries was a Muslim. They didn't tell you that either. They told you that Putin was gonna, help the Christians protect themselves against the liberal onslaught, something like that, right? Well, like I said in the previous videos, why don't you take a look at that little patch his mama sewed on his uniform for him? Because that ain't no crucifix, son. And before those guys were deployed and did not go to Ukraine, they all swore out loud an oath of allegiance to Vladimir Putin. And then they all screamed out loud 3 times, aluminum Equibars. Aluminum Equibars. Aluminum Equibars. Yep. There were some nice peoples you traders picked. Very nice friends of yours. Did Fox News show you how, after all that went on, Putin, not specifying which particular group of Muslims this was dedicated to, but just thanked the Islamic community as a whole during the invasion of Europe, the whole migrant crisis thing and all that good stuff that you were being propagandized to think was Obama's fault. It was all Obama's fault, right? That's Obama and Merkel. That's their big thing, right? They didn't build this. That's the most expensive mosque ever built. I believe it's the largest. And it's in Moscow. Now, while you're thinking about how similar those words sound, I want you to picture in your head right now what the Kremlin looks like. Now, I don't believe that anyone who comes here seeking asylum, just like anyone who comes to Europe genuinely seeking asylum, buys into the horde interpretation of scriptures. And generally speaking, they are not people who support lavish expenditures. Indulgent vanities. They know that God does not appreciate such things while there are children around the world starving to death. Well, it's not the purity of philosophy that those Muslims follow that causes these grandiose structures to be built. In fact, if you go down to their scriptures, it's certainly the conquering side of it. Now, why would people pretending to be Christians build seemingly Islamic structures? And by Islamic, I mean conquest-oriented. Well, why are Russia's only terrorist attacks self-imposed? Why is it that this conquest didn't go north? Think it was just too difficult for them? Think they just couldn't take the winter? You know how many Muslims are in Canada right now?
Lots.
They're like, holy shit, air conditioning outside. This is nice.
This is opposite from the desert.
But during this whole conquest of Europe, did the Scythians come and help us? Or did they fight the Scythians? Not a whole lot. Marginal at best. Not much evidence of the few recorded instances. Maybe they're just stories to blend it all in.
Sorry, I was catching up on the chats. I know Neville's had to go to work, but damn, they didn't teach him about the Cold War in school at all.
Look. Brushed over Stalin, saying that he was just a failed dictator.
Wow. They missed a lot there.
Yeah.
Like, a lot.
I said the only thing he failed at was convincing people that he was a god. And he tried really hard. But my friends, they have sent us just as many history professors as they have televangelists. And just like the evidence revealed on the Rachel Maddow show the other night, and I really challenge any conservative to go and watch some of her reports for themselves, as opposed to, little clips that you see on Fox News. These people go to Canada for 20 years after being trained in Russia to acclimate, to seem like Canadian Americanized people. They go from Russia to Canada for 20 more years to have kids, only to take those children here to, guess what? Have more kids. Just so they can blend in perfectly to our society. All the while having an advantage over us, the American citizen, while we try to get our jobs and advance in life. All the while teaming up against us in little secretive ways, including investments in business, in the music industry, entertainment, movies, video games, and especially software and politics. Fine example of this that didn't even take that long to brew, that we just let waltz right over here and start fucking launching rockets after creating the apps that destroyed the integrity of our ability to report news, you know, like all those news organizations that we used to rely on that had problems and had to shut down and then got replaced with bullshit organizations with similar names. Well, Tesla. What's his name? Elon Musk. The Tesla guy. He had an app for that. And it's funny how he went right into cars after the whole thing happened with Chevy Volt. I wonder. Some kind of international lawsuit or something. He said, okay, you gotta play nice with this guy. I don't fucking know. All I know is that people were starting to build electric cars. Chevy, Honda, Toyota, all had electric cars. And then this asshole was like, I could build an electric car. And then, like, we're sitting there unable to fund our fucking space program. And, you know, there's like all these private companies that have been doing it for years. And they're contracting to communications companies and shit like that. And he's like, I can do that too, and I'm gonna build rockets. And, yeah. You know, balloons are cheaper. That's all I'm saying. And, if you look at drones and you just combine that with dirigibles, you can imagine the type of technology that they're keeping from us. We don't need somebody reinventing the rocket. He is literally a one-man weapon of mass distraction, meant to basically distract people into weird conspiracy theories. Almost, doesn't he believe in the Matrix or some shit? And just like in the book Dune, and I told y'all this a long time ago, I really think I got it narrowed down. I wish I had Trump narrowed down beforehand. She's fucking the table. I wish I had it narrowed down beforehand with Trump. But as soon as they announced it, oh God, was that obvious? I really didn't think the Republicans would allow him to even get on their ticket. Like it just seemed too fucking far-fetched. I didn't realize just how much they had sold their fucking souls on Fox News, man. And there's a couple little clips of them being critical, but don't buy that bullshit. Well, I forget what I fucking talk about. I need a cigarette. I need a thinking stick.
Don't meow at me.
Well, Dune, Arrakis, desert planet. In that book, they had a leader who was sent by the evil Baron to be just a really shitty fucking leader, right? And then he was supposed to be followed up by what? A kind and gentle leader who's going to guide them to the new way, right? That's your Elon Musk right there. It's going to be somebody like him. They might, you know, it might be a Arnold Schwarzenegger type scenario that has to take place first. And considering how much people are starting to catch on to him lately, for him to be the candidate for that, he would have to lay low for a good while. People are kind of getting just sick of him. I wonder why. But he's a prime candidate for the archetype to look for that Russian-backed nice guy that's gonna come and just nail in the coffin on any sort of free thought. It's gonna be just absolute Orwellian closure. You see, when the madness comes from somebody who's obviously belligerent, it's easy to resist. But then when that madness is followed up by a more sinister but silent form, people are inclined to play along just because it brings peace. And that is when the ugly side of communism starts to rear its head. And the horde takes over. Now it's time to rear my ugly head. See, the founding fathers, you can bet your ass they knew what the horde was. You can bet your ass that they knew that there was corruption and the nobility in Europe. And you can bet your ass that these historians that they've sent here over the past 100 of years (100, 200 years at least) they've been making sure that the books that get published weren't about that shit, and that any evidence, well, we don't hear about it. It's not like any of the evidence should be here. We're in the new world, aren't we? None of that shit happened here. How would we even fucking know about it? We didn't even have embassies or, like, officially know that, like, all the countries there are existed 100 years ago. Our founding fathers understood the divisions in society, but they knew their history better than you know it today. They knew it much like I'm describing it. They knew how it connected all the way back to Egypt, as it were. And if you're not familiar with that story, look up how Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh came to be. It'll bring you right back. That's in your Bible, boys and girls. Our founding fathers sought something better for us. And before a political movement or two took hold of the Dutch and the Germans, they had integrated societies. They weren't just a bunch of white people. They were intercultural, very family respectful, not whoredom run rampant. It wasn't just a cesspool of interbreeding the way you'd think of it nowadays. But there was plenty of interbreeding. It was based on love and courtship and proper acquaintance. And our forefathers saw that type of society fall. And I'm sure it was painful for them that they couldn't write into law and have it accepted what their ideals would be. But what they did write into the Constitution was a framework on how to make those ideals progress. And then came the Confederacy. And since then we've had a chance to really embrace those ideals. That were lost when the Templar were exterminated. That had to be kept silent through America's foundation. And are the very reason why we are here. And now, you may see conspiracies about America being some kind of evil thing. But that is put there to defeat America. And you can't let the people who put that lie there win. Any more you can put those imaginary bad guys, any more than you can let them win. And they've shown you some wild shit, man. And they've made you feel like America was founded by Satanists or something, just because there's a star on Washington, D.C. Well, deep in the heart of Russia, there's a lot worse than stars made up by streets. In fact, if you want to see a star, they got those too. One big enough for an entire brigade to undergo unholy baptism in fire worship. I wonder how many tiki torches that took. I bet you Walmart was sold out. And on that bombshell, it's time to end. Because I don't care how many tiki torches you got. What you need to do is remember why a knight carried a sword. It was to protect the weak and the innocent, and women and children, and the immigrant, and the foreigner, even in their own land. Even in their own land, NATO. Now, Americans. Do you have the hearts of knights or the hearts of cowards? Thanks for watching. Click the like. Wrong fucking thing. Which one? I don't even know. Oh, it dragged them. Shit. Now this is the right one. Yeah. So now the video's over. I think.
It's in my heart.